Okay, thank you for attending this PMI webinar. My name is Jeremy Metz with West Metro Fire Rescue in Lakewood, Colorado. And the title of this presentation is Every Rescuer Should Know Their ABCDEs, a Disciplined Approach for Conducting Rope Safety System Checks. Much a mouthful there, but as we get into it here, we'll kind of narrow it down and explain exactly what we're talking about here. So just a little bit about my background. I'm a captain and paramedic and the technical rescue team manager for West Metro Fire Rescue. We're on the western edge of the Denver metro area, and we serve a diverse area, metro area, and foothill kind of wilderness interface, if you will. I've been in the fire service for 19 years. Got my start in fire service as a firefighter in the Air Force and served in mountain communities and my current position at West Metro. I've attained my bachelor's for Fire and Emergency Services Administration from Colorado State University, and currently I'm on the Colorado State Technical Rescue Certification Committee. I'm very excited about that process. In Colorado, we've yet to have a technical rescuer certification, so kind of a grassroots effort getting that started. It's been a long road, a lot of work, but excited to see that process happen in Colorado. And also another interesting new perspective for me in my career is last 2 years I've been working with NFPA with 1983, the standard for life safety equipment, that task group. So it's been a great insight and huge learning curve, and look for that coming out in 2012, the new rewrite for that standard. There's going to be, I think, some pretty broad-reaching changes to that. Definitely just a manufacturer standard, but it does affect us out there, and we should have good working knowledge of it. So this is part of my area in West Metro. This is Red Rocks Amphitheater. A lot of concerts are played there. Very popular spot in visitors to Colorado. So this is a high line that we did there several years back, a training scenario right over the amphitheater itself. So this park, Red Rocks Park, is responsible for a large portion of our calls, our rope rescue calls, and training as well. So just a perfect environment, a beautiful environment to do rope rescue in. So on to the topic here. The objectives for this webinar is to discuss the importance of a rope system safety check. And this is probably something that you're all doing now in your teams without really putting much thought to it. It's just kind of common practice, out there. So we're going to just discuss that. Why is that important? Why should we be doing that? Continue to do that. I want to introduce this error trapping concept, and this will provide some importance when we get kind of the nitty-gritty of the presentation, as why is it important to understand the process of trapping errors, human errors, and to provide a regimented method of conducting a safety check. And that's really kind of the big thrust of my presentation, is to present to you the method that we use at West Metro as a very regimented step-by-step process to conduct this safety check. And also at the end, we're just going to wrap up with just kind of a broad scope discussion of the importance of a disciplined approach to rope rescue. And I'll tell you right from the beginning here, I'll use these terms a lot, disciplined approach, regimented, systematic, and really not to say that we're not doing that now. I think in rope rescue we are very discipline oriented, but I'm going to kind of beg to ask you guys a question of, are you systematic enough? Are you disciplined enough? The more disciplined you can be, the more systematic you can be, the more that you can trap and identify those errors in that second bullet there. Okay, so while I was doing my research for this webinar, I don't know how many out there have seen this, but just recently here, May 23rd, we had a line of duty death from a rope training accident. This is a firefighter, Chip Imker. He was 35 years old at Cambridge, Minnesota Fire Department. And I'll tell you, there's not a lot of information out there. I looked at the department's website and other sources, and really the only thing, media sources, the only thing that really is explaining what happened was this sentence here: is rope rescue training was being conducted at the fire hall or fire station when he placed his foot in a looped rope that became twisted and spread under his weight before it gave, causing him to fall 6 to 8 feet to the concrete floor. He was flown to the local hospital and later died as a result of his injuries. So yeah, I have no information. They're doing a OSHA investigation on this right now, so that's why there's not a lot of details on this. So it's really unclear. Was this a simple, free climb of rope exercise? Was this a ascending exercise, with a harness and devices? I guess we can draw our own conclusion at this point. I guess the point of the matter is, this firefighter died in a vertical, scenario on rope, and he paid the ultimate sacrifice. So I guess this is really a testament to the presentation and how we approach rope rescue, is that no matter if it's a training exercise, training evolution, or if it's an actual rescue, we are putting our people at risk. We can't, simulate that risk in rope rescue. We just can't simulate a vertical environment. So please just kind of remember this, keep this in your thoughts of, how much risk and consequence there is to us in rope rescue. Okay, so what is a system safety check? So what we often look at, and that's what we're looking at right now in the state of Colorado for our certification process, is NFPA 1006. This is the standard for technical rescue professional qualifications. So this is the individual members on your team, how are they qualified? How are they trained? Do they meet all these different job performance requirements? So they do talk about a system safety check, and this is what they say. It's a method of evaluating the safe assembly of a rescue system. Okay, and it's pretty broad stroked. I also have an asterisk in here that I think is important to understand, is that it's prior to placing a human load on the system. So a method of evaluating the safe assembly of a rescue system, pretty generic. I mean, obviously we want to make sure that it's safely assembled, but is it really telling us how to conduct that safety check and what the importance is and a method? No, it really doesn't. So it talks about it, very generic, broad sense. Okay, so why is it important? Why should we do a system safety check? Well, the obvious probably is that safety is paramount to us in the fire service, emergency services. We want to reduce the risk to not only rescuers but also to victims. So we want to check all our rigging, make sure it's correctly done, that we're going to have a safe operation. So that's pretty obvious. We want to have a redundant check of rigging to catch errors. So really this concept is, if I rigged the belay station, do I want to be the same person that does the safety check on that belay station? And the answer is no, because I can't inspect my own rigging because I'm going to kind of get tunnel vision. I'm going to say, well, I rigged it, I think it's good. So really the concept of this redundant check is have a fresh set of eyes come in to check your rigging. If I rig the belay station, maybe I'll have who rigged the main station switch with me. Hey, you check the belay station, I'm going to go check the main station. So you have a fresh set of eyes looking at it, looking for small little errors, things that you might have missed. Now, this is a topic that I'm kind of passionate about, is crew resource management and risk management, and whether you are actively participating in applying crew resource management or risk management. If you don't think you are, you really are. I mean, risk management is huge in rope rescue. Crew resource management is really paramount in rope rescue. So it kind of plays in tune with those fundamentals that conducting a safety check is good risk management principles. And this is something that we're going to introduce and talk about here, is we're going to do this system safety check to trap crew errors. Good point to talk about this here is, I've heard from other teams, other rescuers say, well, we train all the time, I trust my people. They're experts. They're really dialed in. What I want you to do after the end of this presentation, do a little research into what a expert is, a mastery. So Google mastery of skills. I think what you're going to find is the definition of mastery of skills is that you can achieve 100% correctness without errors 90% of the time. So 90% of the time, just think about this, 90% of the time you're going to tie knots correctly. You're going to rig the anchors correctly. So there is a fundamental understood that 10% of the time with humans, even if you've achieved mastery of skills, 10% of the time you may be introducing an error or tying that knot incorrectly or having something rigged incorrectly. So that's kind of an important thing to understand is we are humans and we are prone to error, okay? To error is human. If you believe this concept or not, or if you think that your team is so dialed in and so well trained, please just research it. It is fundamental that we have to make sure we identify that there are going to be errors on the rope rescue scene, and we need to have a method to trap those errors. Okay, this definitely isn't a crew resource management speak, but just to talk about it a little bit is a lot of this information is out there. It's another interesting topic to go and research. Just a couple bullet points on it is really the fundamental concept of it is to have a decisive use of strengths of available resources. So knowing your team members, knowing their strengths, and be honest with you, knowing their weaknesses and assigning those to benefit the team in the best manner. So you probably already do this by kind of default, but this is the really in-depth study of it is crew resource management. So it also is this interrelationship between your people, your policies and procedures, and your equipment. So just a little picture here on the right. So kind of think about this is we're interacting in this environment where our people are coming together with their skills. We have procedures, team-based procedures and policies, and we have equipment that has inherent strengths and weaknesses. So if you kind of imagine where this overlap of all these three circles are, this is kind of the environment that we're working in, this interrelationship and how all those things combine together. We can have the strongest, most highly trained people out there, but if we're lacking in solid procedures, we have a problem. If we don't have the right equipment to do the tasks that we need, we don't have long enough rope, we don't have enough carabiners, we have a problem. So this is kind of the team management, the management philosophy of it, is you're living in this overlap of all this interrelationship. So that is a super brief, crew resource management little introduction there. And so the next topic we're going to talk about is layers to trap crew errors. Whether you agree with me or not, there's going to be human errors. And for me, my philosophy is I understand that could be a potential and identify ways to trap that. Okay, so let's look at this. So let's talk about all of our policies, procedures. There's a lot of crew resource management here as well. We have a high level of proficiency, right? We train our rescuers to the highest level, to that mastery level of skill. We want to maintain situational awareness. Be mindful of the edge. Don't anybody close to the edge. Make sure you're tied in. Watch for rockfall. All those little items maintain that situational awareness. Leadership. Boy, I'm sure everybody out there has been on a scene or a training or been involved in something that probably didn't go as well as it could have, and you can look at the leadership, not to knock the person, but if the strong presence isn't there to really direct the team, direct the rescue, then things kind of fall apart. So leadership's another important element in this. And equipment, and hey, I've said this before. We are working with the best equipment out there. I mean, constantly our equipment is, new innovations, getting stronger. Rope is evolving. So we work with the best equipment. So, that's an important factor for us, is to know the strengths of our equipment. Our equipment is good. Take good care of it, inspect it, replace it when it needs to be replaced, and it's not going to fail us, okay? So the other thing to understand is, with all these layers, think of this like as a block of cheese, a block of Swiss cheese, okay? So you have all these layers that you're putting together. You have this interrelationship on your team that you're working with. And what does Swiss cheese has? Swiss cheese has holes in it, right? Now, if you cut, a couple slices of Swiss cheese and kind of stack them together, you may not, see right through. There's no errors going to get out there, okay? But if you never know when these holes are going to line up, you just never know which day, what training event, which rescue you're going to be on. That's that perfect storm that you have a breakdown in your proficiency level, you have a breakdown in leadership, you have equipment failure. So we never know when that event's going to happen. But if we just build layers onto our procedures to trap any errors, that's what we're looking for. That's what's going to keep us safe. So that's kind of the error trapping, the crew resource risk management error trapping concept that I wanted to kind of get across. And it's a good study in that whole discipline there. Again, we're probably working with very highly motivated people, disciplined, well-trained, great equipment, good policies and procedures. It's very interesting to me. I'm passionate about how that is all interrelated, because if there's a breakdown at any one of those levels, you're introducing potential for errors, accidents, injuries. So that's kind of what drove me to do this talk today, the webinar. So kind of back on topic here is back to what safety checks. Well, let's talk about, and I pretty much just went to my library in the fire station and pulled off every I'm sure I have almost 90% of all the rope rescue textbooks that are out there. I pulled them all off. I scoured through every one of them to see what are the authors out there. What is Steve Hudson talking about safety checks? What are the experts in our field? What do they say about safety checks? So this is one, and not naming names. None of this is wrong, mind you. This is all what I've been taught before. This is all probably what you probably do without thinking much about it. But one textbook says that working in pairs with a separate safety officer, someone checks your rigging. A different set of eyes may catch something that yours have missed. Kind of talked about that earlier, that redundancy of if you break something, you should not be that person that does a safety check, okay? And mind you, I believe this textbook, this is the only thing, the only 2 sentences in that whole textbook that talks about safety check, okay? All right, so let's get back. Okay, the next book talks about the buddy system is a safety check method where a person who did not participate in the rigging inspects all part of the rope system. Pretty much kind of a carbon copy from the first book. That's all they talk about, okay? Switch team members, you check mine, I'll check yours. So it's that buddy, kind of seen a trend here. It's that buddy check concept. The next textbook, bullet 3 there, third bullet, you should use a touch method when inspecting the system, where the inspector places his hands on every component to ensure nothing is overlooked. So like this is introducing a tactile component to it. Hey, grab it, make sure the carabiner's locked, make sure that knot's secure, pull on the anchor system in the direction of the edge transition. Is that focused appropriately? So I definitely like this approach in addition to the buddy check. Again, this is the only thing that's in that textbook, is use a touch method. Okay, and then we have perform a safety check before using a system and recheck the equipment when in use. Another good concept, that what I talked about, perform a safety check before placing a human load on it. Recheck it, do your edge transition, go down a ways and recheck it. Is everything staying equalized, load sharing? Are we having any issues or anything shifting on us? So another good concept. To me, and this is kind of my approach to this is, there's nothing wrong with the concepts out of these textbooks. My jab on it is that it's not systematic, okay? These are the concepts that probably most of us are dealing with. Hey, check it, redundant check, but it's just not detailed enough for me, and that's kind of what brought me to kind of sit back and think about the system that I developed and the way that we go about doing it. So here's some of my thoughts about the safety check. I've hit on this one, hammered on some of the authors a little bit. I believe it's just darn too vague in the textbooks and the standards. It's not incorrect by any means. They're on mark with it, but it's just not disciplined enough. It's not regimented enough for me and my liking. So you could probably tell my theme here is that it should be conducted in a very systematic manner. Okay, and I would like us to see a shift to a pre-flight inspection, like you would see in the airline or aviation industry. It is, how many times are pilots, how many hours do they have? Every time they take off, they are going through the same pre-flight checkoff list, right? They have many, many, many hundreds of hours. They're doing the same thing time and time again. So if you can kind of shift your train of thought from, and the buddy check principle still applies, that's still good, but it seems like the trend is that that's really the only thing that we're asking out of that safety check is, hey, let's just do a buddy check. Let's switch, make sure you're rigged okay. And that's really the only mindset that I see out there. I would like to see that shifted to a pre-flight inspection. And one thing, and when we get in this, you'll see, have an acronym or a checklist that's easy to remember, that it's going to be completed the same way every time. That's that disciplined, systematic approach. If your team does it today this way, and another shift, or another part of the team has a rescue tomorrow, they're going to do it the exact same way, because you have team procedures, you have team training that kind of outlines what the expectations are. Okay, so without further ado, as the title is the namesake of this is the 5-point system safety check that we came up with. It's ABCDE. It's the acronym, and what it stands for is A is for anchor, or anchors, B is for belay, C is for carabiners, D is for your descent control device, your DCD, and E is for edge, and that's kind of a double whammy there. You have edge protection, and you actually have your edge personnel that are at the edge there. So that's kind of what we came up with, a real simple acronym, easy to remember, easy to use, and it's been really successful for us. We've been able to use this for about 6 years now, and it's ingrained so deeply. People are, without any prompting, any reminding, it's being used very successfully. Okay, and so this is what I think the advantage are of this system, is that it was kind of thought of, I'm a paramedic, we do a lot of EMS in my organization. I know there's some other paramedics out there in EMTs, and it was kind of very much on the same line of how we do a primary medical assessment. Your ABCs, your airway, breathing, circulation, right? You come up to a patient and you cannot open their airway. you never go to B, you never go to C, okay? So it's very much in that thinking of that, because a lot of us are in the medical field out there, that we're applying that patient care, that, you know, very detail-oriented medical assessment to rope rescue, okay? Just had to add a D and an E on the end of it to make it all flow. But that's kind of it. You're kind of looking from the head to the toe of the patient. You're identifying, you know, holes in the system, potential problems. So this is, you know, when you explain it like that, like, oh, it's kind of like a medical assessment of your system. You're evaluating a patient. You're doing it in a very systematic order. And if you find something wrong with A, if you find something wrong with anchors, you're not going to go to B to Belay. You're going to fix your anchors, make sure that's you're satisfied with that, recheck that, then you go to B. Okay, and you're probably going to get tired of me saying this through this whole webinar, but I do believe it's a very disciplined and systematic approach, because it's kind of just a flow chart. It's a checkoff list, if you will. So you know you're going to start at A, then you're going to go to B, C, D, E. And that just in and of itself gives you that disciplined, time and time again approach. You know, you're going to do it that way. Team member on the next shift is going to do it that way, so on and so forth. And the other success to this that I believe is that when we do size up, and I'm sure there's 100 different ways to do size up of a rope rescue site. We always work from the edge to identify, you know, where our victim is, where do we need to make that edge transition, and we work our way backwards. When I first started, in the training that I guess I was associated with wasn't as advanced as what, you know, I think is out there today. I think we got into some pitfalls where we'd identify anchors first, like, wow, there's a great big rock right there. Let's go put our system right there, and wherever that takes us, I guess that's where we're going. Well, we've kind of reversed that order now, and it's been successful to say you need to identify where you're going over that edge and keep everything in line with that, and you work your way backwards. You work your way to the belay station, the main station, and then the anchors. So when we're doing our safety check, we're essentially working in reverse order from that. So we work from the anchors back all the way to the edge. So this is kind of, I guess, one piece of the puzzle of our overall approach to operations is, you know, for size up and giving assignments, we work from the edge back to the anchors, and when we're ready for game time, we're ready for safety check and roll call, we do that in reverse order. Anchors all the way back to the edge. Okay, we're done with our safety check. Everybody's in their position, ready to go, and we go. So it's a very kind of, you know, very kind of almost militaristic, like precision about, you know, how you're conducting your operations, and it really does give that kind of leadership element to it that I really do like. And you know, I think what a very hard thing for me is trying to put myself back to a point where I was a student and I had no knowledge of rope rescue, and I think we're doing a disservice when we just kind of present vague, hey, just do a buddy check of your, you know, do a safety check, do a buddy check. Just think about that newest member on your team, or if you're involved in training, if you're involved in teaching new students, try to put yourself back to that place where you had no experiential knowledge of systems and hands-on ability, and really try to give them a tool, an easy acronym, to kind of put all this together. And we found that this does work well for that. And this is kind of, I guess, a side note that I've noticed with this, is you get to hear people kind of marching through this in their mind. Okay, anchors, they're equalized, they're focused in the right direction. So as a team leader and as an officer, it's a great display of that individual confidence that they're going through their system analysis, they're calculating their safety factors, they're understanding where the forces are going in the system. So I think it really does kind of bring the level of your team up when you're able to kind of have this process that they're going through out loud, and everybody on the team is like, wow, that person's dialed in. They know the anchor system. They know the belay. And it's kind of a side benefit of this. That's something that I certainly have noticed, that it's helped kind of bring, a little bit of confidence. Maybe not confidence, but just let them think out loud. Let your team members think out loud. And so you kind of all get on the same page with everything. So just kind of general thoughts about procedure, and this is, again, this whole topic, you're probably doing this already, and, maybe not given it a whole lot of thought, but this may be just a flow chart for you to use. Beat this one up pretty good. Check should be conducted by someone other than who had rigged it. Check for, everywhere you go through, you're going to check for correct knot application. Make sure that the knot's tied appropriately. Make sure it has enough strength for the anticipated load. Just as kind of, I think we're ingrained to look through knots and rigging and stuff like that. So there's not like an individual station for knots. You're checking that throughout the whole system. And another thing that we would like to do as we're going through it, we're evaluating what the force is on the system and what our static system safety factor is. West Metro, we achieve a 10-to-1 safety factor is our goal. That's definitely another talk in of itself, is a good debates on what's appropriate safety factor out there. But for us, we're very comfortable with having a 10-to-1 static system safety factor, and really evaluating that as we're going through our process. Okay, so just a little bit on, we're going to go through the acronym here, ABCDE. We're going to start with anchors, obviously. And what I'll tell you is, if you, want to introduce something like this to your team, or, start using this concept, this doesn't really take place, this is kind of intuitive, but this doesn't take place of training on this particular topic. Anchors is a day-long class on its own. So we're not forsaking, the individual skill and good, understanding of forces and anchoring techniques. So this is kind of just, you're putting it all together. You have the skill, you have the knowledge. This is just kind of putting it all together, and just some things. This is probably not exhaustive by any means, and I would love it if you guys had more things for me to put in these acronyms, little trapping. Remember, these are things that we want to use to trap any potential errors or any potential catastrophic events. So you're going to see a lot of this, number one here, rig properly. And that's a very generic thing, obviously, but if you're going to use a high-strength tie-off, obviously everybody needs to be trained on that, how to recognize it, what's proper. If it's a wrap 3 pull 2, how that's done with your team. So that's kind of a very generic statement. You're going to see that kind of a repetitive theme for each one. But is it rigged properly for the application that you're using? We do use a lot of multi-point anchors just because of our terrain. Even in the commercial environment, top of structures, in the wilderness environment, we do use a lot of multi-point anchors just because we tend to have a lot of small anchors that we need to collectively put them in a system to get the required strength. So we want to make sure those are focused appropriately towards our edge transition. If it's a anchor that is not a bomb-proof anchor, and we need to evaluate that and make sure if that's the case, we need it backed up, we need that back tied, or come up with a different anchor. And we like to calculate the system forces. How are the forces being distributed through that whole system, all the way through the anchors? If we're putting a 2-person, 2 kilonewton load on it, how is that being distributed through our system? So kind of in tie with that is force multipliers. And again, probably a whole nother class just on that alone, but think about angles. Anytime you are introducing angles into your rigging, you are multiplying force, okay? Our rule of thumb, again, this is just on anchors, is if we're doing a multi-point anchor, we try not to go higher than 90 degrees because we all know that at 120 degrees you're going to see 1 times the load. If you have two separate anchors and it's at 120 degrees, you're going to see 1 time the load on each one of those anchor. But what I found is it's hard for people to see 120 degrees. It's much easier for them to see 90 degrees. They can kind of turn, get lined up with that, and they say, okay, yeah, that's a right angle right there. So what we just teach is that the rule of thumb is anything greater than a 90-degree interior angle. It's not like you can't do it. It's just not advised. You start thinking that you're applying more force to the system than really what you should be. So this is kind of our down and dirty on the anchor portion of it. Belay, and for whatever, that's, boy, we can probably get into debates on, what type of belay devices are good, and our tandem prusiks, the most successful thing out there. Regardless of what your philosophy is, if you're using a device for a belay or tandem prusik belay or a 2-rope system, you're still going to have an active belaying component. So here's that number 1 again, that rig properly, again for your device, for your technique. For us, we do use tandem prusik belay. So what's very critical for me is knowing that those prusiks are rigged properly, but they're snug, that the bridges are down, tight on that hose rope, and we can hear it and we can feel it because, I believe by looking at the test data, if they're not snug, they're not going to do the intended job. We do a lot of pre-tensioning on our belays. If their anchors aren't close enough to the edge, we can pre-tension it, get some slack out of the system, get it off the ground a little bit. So that works really well for us. And just a thought, if you do have a belay activation, mainline failure, belay activation, have you rigged in a means to transfer the load back to the mainline? For us, we use a rating release hitch or use a commercial strap. If you're using the commercial devices out there, you can override the device and let it transfer load back onto the main line. So that's our belay check. Carabiners, again, it's kind of one of those things that could have been in the knot, hey, just work, go ABC, and carabiners were good. We're very critical on carabiner usage. We're not using big steel carabiners anymore. We've gone to aluminum carabiners, locking carabiners. So we're very disciplined on being very critical about where carabiners are used, make sure that they're locked, there's no side loading or 3-way loading on those carabiners. And if we have something that's in a vertical orientation, that we want the gate away from an edge, and we want the screw going down. So if gravity were to, vibrations of gravity would not have a chance to unscrew that carabiner. You've been seeing probably a lot of just snapshots that I put in there, some photos. This is a rescue that we had probably about 5 years ago on it's about a 2 million gallon water tank that was under construction. And the photo on the top there is it was a positioning hook for one of the workers, and the gate failed on it, probably just due to wasn't replaced when it needed to be replaced, misuse, not being cared for, and this caused this worker to fall about 100 feet inside this water tank under construction in a confined space environment and a rope rescue. So, failure of our carabiners, could certainly have the same kind of catastrophic situation. Okay, descent control device, your means of lowering your team members down to the victim. Again, there's that all generic, rigged properly. Are we using a scarab? Are you using a brake rack? Pencil ID? Whatever you use. Again, that's why it's very generic as to what your team uses and the manufacturer's recommendations for the loads, and make sure that they're rigged properly for that. Kind of one of the big mistakes I see, it's not a huge mistake, is if you're the person doing this mainline station, the lowering station, what do you want to do when you rig it? you want to load that brake rack or that scarab, you load that completely up and you lock it off, don't you? I mean, I know everybody's guilty out there of doing that. And it's just kind of, this is small potatoes by all means, but just understand the evolution of your process is that, you know, once you rig it, you go through your safety check and your rescuer gets attached to the system, that rescuer needs to get positioned towards the edge. So what's the first thing that you're going to do is you're going to undo your brake rack, you're going to undo your scarab so that you can let slack out and position that load. Okay, so we just say make sure that it's ready to position the load. So if you're in a brake rack, it's one bar. You have one bar, the rope reeved through one bar. The scarab, same thing. We just use the center tube, and it just passes through that until we get that load positioned. Then we go ahead and load it for the anticipated load. And just think about the operation of the lowering station. Is this going to be a lower, and then we're going to need to convert from a lower to a haul? Is this going to be a long lower, and you may need to pass a knot? You may need to jettison your belay, attach your belay to your main line, and pass a knot through that brake rack to keep your operation going. So just even the team leader or whoever's rigging this station, just give some thought there. Even if you know you're not going to convert from a lower to haul, even if you know you're not going to pass a knot, what if a knot comes out of the bag? So just be ready. You know, have some extra equipment there. Maybe have a anchor ring there, some extra, you know, pulleys, carabiners. Just think through that process of, hey, if I have to transfer loads, if I have to pass knots, you know, I got everything ready to go here. Okay, and now we come to the edge. So again, we're working our way forward here, and edge is that double whammy. We have edge personnel. Man, I had a scary, very scary near miss a couple of years ago. We were teaching one of our classes up in Red Rocks, so very rocky terrain. It was actually one of the instructors wasn't real close to the edge, but just lost some footing and kind of lunged towards the edge. He wasn't going to be kind of working at the edge, so he wasn't tied in or anything. So, you know, that is just a very vivid in my memory of that happening. So I am much more so disciplined about the edge as saying, you know, no one goes closer than 6 foot to the edge without being tied in. And what we like to see is a travel restrict or tied in with some adjustability on a travel restrict device, rope, part of a kit, you know, whatever you use in your team there. And limit the number of personnel close to the edge. Generally, it's not a huge problem because we're probably operating in limited numbers. You know, we're trying to fill a lot of stations. If we've got a haul team, you're going to need a lot of people on the haul team. But, you know, 1 to 2 personnel at the edge max is really, again, keep that discipline. Don't let your team start creeping up there to look over the edge. Just identify who's going to be your edge personnel, make sure they're tied in, and make sure that that rope, as you can see in the picture there, it's positively, the terminal end of that rope is positive into his harness. I've seen other people rig it where they have like a prusik on the rope, and then the host rope that prusik's on is free. There's no knot on the end of it, and if you were to panic and grab that prusik and mine that prusik, you're going to go right over the edge. Excuse me. So we're going to also do edge protection when we do our edge station check. So we want to make sure that we do have edge protection accounted for, that it's placed and it's secured. It's not going to travel over the edge when we start loading it. We want to make sure that we account for any lateral edge movement. So, you know, this is kind of that concept of if we truly work from our edge transition back, we know exactly what our fall line is, and we should build our anchors focused to that fall line. We should rig our main, you know, descent control device directly in line with that fall line. But, you know, terrain, depending on the terrain that you might have, you may have obstacles that the rope's going to ride on that it might want to shift to one side or the other. So just account for any of that movement at the edge. And something that we have a lot of in the natural environment
is you may have your edge transition at the top, your topmost edge transition, but once they get down, you might have a secondary roof and a secondary edge transition. So it's not a bad idea to evaluate that. Sometimes you certainly can't see that, but send your rescuer down with some other secondary edge protection that they can place along the way. All right, so this is, we've kind of taken this a step further, that we have issued these pocket cards. They're just a laminated pocket card to our team members, and on one side of it we have the strengths of our materials, the kilonewton strengths, and on the back of it we kind of have, you know, very condensed version of our size up procedure, the safety check procedure, and once we're done, and I said this is like almost a precision device to say, okay, we do our size up, give rigging assignments. We do our safety check, A, B, C, D, E. We're ready for go time. So the roll call then, something this isn't anything I invented. This has been passed down to me with trainings. These roll call orders and operational stages has been around for a long time. But to go through that order, you know, belay, main, edge, attendant, and then operational stages. We're going to do a roll call, make sure everybody's ready to go. Position the load. So there's that brake rack again. I almost guarantee you're going to have your team member unload that rack because they probably haven't loaded, because you have to position that load. Pre-tension system, and then you're ready. Move the load. So this is just kind of a really good flow chart for us, for our team members. You know, a good memory jogger of all the little points and just the way that the whole scene flows up there. By the way, if anybody's interested in this, I have this on a publisher file. I'd be happy to email it to you if you want to shoot me an email at the end of the presentation. I would be happy to send you the file, and if you want to use it, that would be absolutely great. Okay, so again, not probably something that you guys have been doing time and time again, these safety checks, and you probably haven't given it much thought. But that was the procedure. I sat down and it just felt like it wasn't regimented enough, it wasn't disciplined enough for us, and that's what got us to develop that procedure. And a couple more slides here, and we'll wrap up here. This slide here is just kind of some bullet points, some shotgun thoughts about, I've kind of been throwing this discipline approach term around, and again, I said it before, I'll say it again. By no means do I think we aren't disciplined enough in doing rope rescue, or that it lacks discipline. But just, these are some thoughts on how to maybe introduce more of the layers for that air training. So just some thoughts here. So your size up should be methodical. I was guilty of this in my early stages, my training, and what we did in our team is that the pitfall that we had is we would identify what anchors we had, and we would just kind of make that work for us, and wherever the edge transition was, that's kind of what we worked with, or we deflected the line, or what have you. So just however you do it, I know there's 100 different ways to do size up. Make it methodical. Have a flow chart with it. Have a checklist for your team. What to identify, how many victims. I kind of give you our procedure, working from the edge back, and that works good for us. The leadership, and this is kind of a very recurring theme, a lot of the stuff that we talk about, especially the crew resource management. The assignment should be given by the team leader that are clear, and you define the objectives and the responsibilities. So you as a team leader, you do your size up, you're identifying your edge, you're identifying where your belay station is, your main station, your anchors. Communicate, your assignments to your team. Make sure they understand what their responsibilities are. When you're done rigging that main system, I want you to go and safety check the belay station. Belay, when you're done rigging the belay station, I want you to go safety check the main station. So very good, strong, presence and leadership. Very clear on your objectives and responsibilities. This next bullet is really, I guess, what my talk was today. Conduct a regimented safety check prior to placing a human load on the system. I look back to how we did safety checks before we kind of developed this procedure, and it wasn't wrong. Again, nothing wrong with what's in the textbooks by the authors, nothing wrong with everybody's practices out there. But what I reflect back on now is what I saw was, I think people, they were just looking for things to come out and bite them. They were looking, oh, okay, there's a carabiner, and they were just kind of wandering around and say, well, let's see, I got to see if anything's going to trip, come and fall on my head here. It didn't give me that sense of security like it was regimented enough. So, if anything, if you can take away anything from the webinar today, is look back at your procedures and maybe introduce something that works good for your team. Communications, who hasn't been on a call or a training, that communications come up as an issue, as a lesson learned. Hey, we could have been better with communications. Just thoughts on that is make sure that you use a very, we even go by a script, very clear text, verbal commands. Be careful with words or terms that can be misunderstood. Words that sound alike. That we don't want to get those confusions. So make sure that you even come up with like another card to say these are commands. We're going to say stop. We're not going to say whoa. We're not going to say yeah. We're going to say the golden word is stop. Anybody here stop? That's what you do. And then the team leader really should be the one that's verbally orchestrating the movement of rope. Okay, they're sitting back in a good view of the work site. They're probably definitely not going to be able to see the rescuer going over the edge or once over the edge, but put them in a vantage point that they can see or hear the whole operation. Definitely not exhaustive by all means, but just some real quick thoughts on that. So. Hey, listen, this has been very great for me to give you some of my ideas today. In summary, I just want to leave you with some parting thoughts. Evaluate your rope rescue procedures and operations. And I put it back on you. Are they methodical enough? I'm sure they're methodical. I'm sure you're disciplined out there. I just ask you to ask yourself, are they methodical enough? Have you done enough to layer and trap any errors that may come up in your systems? Develop standardized team procedures, including safety checks. And then lastly, safety checks can find those holes in that Swiss cheese. We want to find those and prevent a catastrophic event. This is really kind of putting it together. Think of those circles that we talked about in crew resource management. These 3 bullets is to a T interrelationship between people, procedures, and equipment. And you're living in the middle. You're living in that overlap of those, okay? And you want to hone in on that and keep your operations in that area. So I want to thank everybody very much for joining in on the webinar. I really enjoyed it. Please feel free to ask questions. My email address is on the bottom here. I know it's also on the webinar page. The presentation is also on the PMI website. And I will entertain any questions now. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Jeremy. Let me just switch the screen over here. Alrighty, so you're going to ask any questions that you have in the chat/questions area of your control panel, and I will read them off to Jeremy. So the first question is, I wasn't at the beginning of the presentation, so sorry if you mentioned this, but how long has West Metro been using the ABCDE system, and how often is it adjusted or reviewed?
Okay, yeah, I did probably mention that a little bit. This was developed, we were writing our manuals, our procedures, when probably about 5 years ago. We've been using it for about 5 years. And we do adjust, I mean, ABCDE has been there, from that time. it does seem like it's growing like every year. I think of like another bullet point to put on like anchors, to put on, hey, for a 90-degree change of direction, we're increasing by 1.4, 1.5, 1.6, depending on what you believe. But so that's kind of, it's almost like every year I'm thinking about adding like another little bullet point onto each little laundry list item.
All right. Let's see. The next question is, on the edge slide, the rescuer seemed to be fully dependent on the restraint. Do you consider this okay for edge personnel?
Okay, let's go back to that that slide. Yeah, the important thing for me is that he is in that host rope, that travel restrict rope, and this is this is in Uray actually. The slope's not that great. You can actually walk down probably to where like a secondary edge is, and he's certainly putting most of his load on that travel, the prusik. But I think a key thing is that his host rope is terminated in a loop into his harness. So for some reason, if he were to panic and grab his prusik, that was going to, yes, that will allow him, that's going to travel, but he's still going to be stopped by that host rope that's terminated off into his harness. If this was a pure vertical edge right there, you would want that host rope where it's looped and terminated in your harness. You'd want to size that so that you're going to be stopped right at that edge transition for an edge personnel. But I think because this is kind of a slope, sloping with a secondary edge, that that was kind of sized to get down a little bit lower to place some other edge protection. So I think you just have to evaluate that, but just be attentive to know that rope is kind of terminated into the harness there.
Okay. Do you have a safety check for those people who approach the edge in the beginning when you reverse the ABCDE check?
Let me see if I understand the question. So the edge personnel that are rigging the edge, do I have a check for them that when they are rigging the edge or approaching the edge? Does that seem like what the question is?
Let's see. Yes, that is the question.
Okay. Yeah, the first thing, like part of the size up, will identify the hot zone, if you will, to no one past this point of the edge unless you're tied into the system. So I'll immediately, again, clear assignments, clear objectives, immediately assign, okay, you two are edge, you need to rig your edge line. Sometimes we can take advantage of, the main station is rigging a good anchor. Maybe we can just clip into that anchor for an edge line. But if it's something that we need to get to quickly, we'll assign the edge to rig their own anchor, their own edge line, and they kind of have that, that imaginary like 6 foot back from the edge. No one past this point on the edge until you are, we have an anchor, you're tied in, and we do safety check, that individual, is your harness on correctly or your carabiners locked before you approach the edge. So there is that, I guess, that little personal check going on too. The ABCDE is kind of maybe a broader umbrella of the whole system, but there are, good personal safety accountability checks going on as well.
Okay. Do other agencies utilize the system as far as you know, especially other fire agencies?
Well, I've been presenting it pretty much since we've developed it. We host a technical rescue course every year through our training center. So I've been presenting it for the last 5 years, and we do train with a number of agencies throughout Colorado metro area. Whether they use it during the class and have gotten really good feedback from them, and whether they've completely adopted that back with their agency, I'm not 100% sure. Although I know they kind of carry the concept back with them, but as far as it's a regimented procedure, I'm not real sure on that. That'd be interesting. I actually should follow up with that and see who, if anybody, has adopted it.
Okay. Do you ever have a single rescuer go down to secure a gecko patient, and how many lines do you send them down on?
Yeah, so just so like somebody clinging onto a ledge or something like that. We'll certainly do that. We do that quite often in Red Rocks in the amphitheater. We tend to do team-based lowering operations, and we've kind of gone away from rappel-based operations. So we'll certainly do a single rescuer going down, putting a victim harness on a clinger, get them into the system and lower or haul whatever's appropriate. But generally our technique is team-based. So single rescuer more times than not, but really everything's done topside and not much for that rescuer to do other than just kind of navigating edges and getting down and securing the victim.
All right. Once rigging is complete, who exactly conducts the system safety check before the roll call?
Oh, that's a really good question. Generally we have a safety officer assigned to specifically, and this is a good point of discussion too, I'm glad this question came up, is in our organization we have a safety officer that is on shift all the time. That's the safety officer for our fire calls and our EMS calls and all the various calls that we have. When we get into technical rescue though, really you should be looking at a safety officer that is trained at the level 2 or the technician, whatever language you want to use. If you need to rely on that skill level and experience to be a safety officer for your technical rescue operation. So we generally will use our safety officer, which is a technical rescue team member, to conduct those checks. In absence of that, like I said, that happens most of the time is just using that safety officer. In like a teaching environment, when we do our academy or our school or just some training scenarios, we'll have the team leader do it just so their confidence in the system's there and they're not involved in rigging. And what I'll be honest with you, there's a lot of redundancy. Even though our safety officer might do it, the belay station probably still going to go to the main station. The main station is still going to go to the belay station. And then at the end, we go through it all again. But we've kind of gotten ingrained now that once that ABCDE starts happening, people know we're very close to going over the edge. So we start going through that process. They're starting to get ready. They're starting to get the stokes ready. Make sure the processes are snug again. So kind of a lengthy explanation there. Good question. Generally, our safety officer will do it, or team leader, but there's a lot of overlap. It's a lot of redundancy in doing it.
Okay. If a single rescuer goes over the edge, do you or NFPA 1983 require 2 lines attached to the rescuer?
Well, I guess I'll handle the 1983 first of all. Maybe they were thinking NFPA 1006. 1983 is just more the equipment standard, manufacturer standard. So NFPA 1006, actually probably really talking about 1670. NFPA 1006 is professional individual qualifications. So it's more, can you build a mechanical advantage system? Can you belay? Can you build an anchor system? To my knowledge, there's nothing in any of the standards that specifically states you have to have a 2-rope system or a mainline belay line system. Certainly there's, if you look at the appendices of some of the NFPA documents, it talks a little bit more about safety factors, and your organization should evaluate the risks and consequences, and you determine as an organization, as an authority having jurisdiction, what the appropriate safety factor is, what level of equipment you can use, and I think that kind of plays in tune with that 1-rope, 2-rope system. For us, though, I'll be honest with you, we do very little with one single rope. We'll do single rope for low angle, for accessing We get cars we have a number of canyons and roadways that kind of go through our district where we have canyons. We'll access the vehicle or a patient with a single rope system, just single rescuer, just for patient access, start treating the patient, getting them packaged. But as a team operation, we're really kind of ingrained into main belay system, and we do have situations where we can get rid of the belay, after we've gone through rough terrain and we need to extend the rope, but it's kind of getting a little exhausted. But I guess a recap on that is my knowledge, there's no requirement from NFPA to have a two-rope system. They kind of are putting it back on the individual jurisdictions and organizations to evaluate your risk, and you decide what's appropriate for you.
All right, that is all the questions that are on here so far. If you have any other last-minute ones, go ahead and put them up there. In the meantime, I'm going to go through kind of the closeout part of this. If you visit the website that is shown on your screen right now, there'll be a link there to ask Jeremy further questions. It'll just take you to his email. You can also download the slides from this presentation or watch the live recording of the webinar. Those are both going to be posted on the website within 24 hours. Jeremy's direct email is right there on the screen, so if you'd like to email him with further questions or comments, feel free. PMI Webinar Series hosts webinars frequently. We do them at least once a month, so keep an eye on our website for future dates and topics. And for future news and updates, including our future webinars, you can sign up for PMI's e-newsletter, you can follow PMI on Twitter, and you can also find PMI and West Metro Fire on Facebook at the links shown at the bottom of the screen. So, without further any questions, it doesn't look like. So thank you, Jeremy, very much, and thank you everyone for attending.
Thank you.